The Retirement Cafe podcast, episode 61, must-read books for 2020.
Retired or thinking about retirement? You've come to the right place. Welcome to the Retirement Cafe podcast. In each episode, we bring you an important conversation with insight, tips and knowledge, all designed to help you live a fulfilling and successful life in retirement. Here's your host, Chartered Financial Planner and accredited later life advisor, Justin King.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Retirement Cafe podcast. Following on from last week's episode about how to make New Year's resolutions stick, I want to chat to you today about the books I recommend you read this year to help you have your best year yet. But before I launch into that, I have some exciting news. Well, it's exciting for me anyway. I'm delighted to announce that we've got a sponsor for the Retirement Cafe, for the Retirement Cafe podcast. And this is going to be from a software supplier who creates something called the Timeline app. Now, for those of you who haven't heard of Timeline app, it's a state-of-the-art retirement income planning software that helps financial planners like me help bring your retirement journey to life and answer your big retirement income questions. Now, I'd like to introduce you to, you've heard him on the podcast before, Abraham Alcasania, who is the managing director and the kind of the brains behind the Timeline app. Welcome, Abraham.
Hi, Justin. How are you?
Very well, very well. Great to have you on the podcast again, and thank you so much for supporting it.
No, it's a pleasure. You know, we like the great work you're doing, and we're looking for a way to be part of it, really.
Yeah, well, that's wonderful. So, Abraham, now you know I use your app, and I'm using it to do lots of stuff. But for those of the audience who may not know of your software, what does it do?
Yeah, sure. So Timeline app is really the next generation software used by financial planners and enterprises to create evidence-based, data-driven, and elegantly simple, sustainable withdrawal strategies for their clients' retirement. As you said, it's all about helping clients answer the big retirement income questions that they have, which is, to my mind, will I run out of money? How long, how do I come up with a way to spend down my assets in a way that essentially the asset, the portfolio outlives me? That's the question we're trying to answer.
Yeah, and of course, for financial planners like me, the clients come in and they've got a whole heap of different assets that they've got, pensions, investments, ISAs, etc. And, they're looking for help to design a portfolio that will be sustainable, that will basically hopefully outlast them, not so that they don't outlive the money themselves. You don't want to die poor. So now, obviously, this is you wrote a book on I think it was called the 4% Rule. I think
Beyond the 4% Rule. Yes.
Sorry, Beyond the 4% Rule. Thanks, Abraham. It is on my bookshelf behind me. I can pull it out of there. I'm sure it's not signed. Maybe I could get it signed now.
It might be worth something when I die.
So but of course it's that that the difficulty that planners have because we can't tell the future. So Timeline for me, of course, is really looking at the historical returns and go, look, if I had to put a portfolio together like this, what would it have done in historical returns? It's not a fortune teller, it's not a forecasting tool, but at least it gives me a bit of a steer to see how those assets that I could invest in for my clients, how they would have performed in the past. Have you got much more to add to that?
Yes, well, indeed. I mean, I get asked this question all the time. People say to us, well, Abraham, you've used extensive historical data in creating this software, but is that enough? Can we do better? And my response is always, look, we can use future returns if you provide it. If you know what asset classes are going to do over the next, over the next 10, 20, 30 years, and you give me that data. It's just really a question of, plugging the new data in and I'll create the results. But of course, we know that that's not possible. Hence why we use the extensive asset class return. So we have data going back 1900. So that gives you about 120 years of capital market data. And essentially what you do within that is you basically run scenarios, you stress test your portfolio through all of the good times and the bad times that we've got. And so the idea is, based on that data set, you will create typically 1,000, maybe in some cases even 1,200 type of scenarios, market conditions. And so the way to think about it, Mr. Client or Miss Client, is, look, you've got 30 years of retirement ahead of you. I am humble and honest enough to say to you that I don't know what the future holds. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 1,200 lives. I'm going to run 1,200 scenarios, including the good ones, the bad one. If you think over the last 100 years, we've had World War I, the Great Depression, World War II, different market crashes or market events since then, the Black Monday, all of these historical events. I'm going to test the impact of all of these market conditions on your retirement journey. That is a starting point to help us make some important decisions, i.e., we want to create a plan that will survive some of the worst case scenarios. And that's the plan. And then, of course, we're going to track the plan. We're going to monitor the plan, your portfolio against the plan, which is, another thing that Timeline does, which is we're going to track the client's portfolio. We're going to track it against the plan. And we're going to, with the judgment of, a financial advisor, make informed decisions along the way. So it's just really a basis point, a base point, if you like, to start thinking about your retirement plan.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for that explanation, Abraham. And I commend the software. As you know, I use it, so I'm really pleased that you're sponsoring the Retirement Cafe podcast, because I've always been a fan of the software, and I'm really pleased to be associated with your company. So, on to this week's episode. I'm once again joined by Kathy, my wife and co-director here at MFP Wealth Management, and the brains behind the Retirement Cafe podcast. And last week you may have heard her talk about, we were chatting about New Year's resolutions. So if you missed that episode, please go back and listen to that, because it's proving pretty popular. So welcome again, Kathy.
Hello.
Hi. So we're going to talk about books.
We're going to talk about books, and you like your books, don't you?
I do.
It's a bit of a stunning joke how many books you buy and read each year. I think what you're saying, your Audible count alone for 2019 was 46 books. That's Audible.
That's Audible.
Never mind the ones you actually flick through.
No. So probably that's my first tip of the week, is how to read a lot of books. I do read physical books. There are a lot of books that I read when I want to make notes in. Make notes in the margins. In fact, Olivia, our eldest, gave me some Mr. Men magnetic bookmarks this year for Christmas, which I'm really quite chuffed about, because they do help me do that. So yeah, actually reading books, this is quite a good topic. Before I get to the actual books that I want to talk about, write notes in books. I often get an Audible book and a physical, the physical book, because I listen to it on Audible, and then when I'm running or something, or walking the dog or what have you, and then I kind of go, actually, I want to go reread that and write some notes about it. I also read on Kindles. You can, and now you can download a lot of books free from your library.
Right.
So that's pretty good. Check out your library, and you can get an ebook reader and Audible reader for your library books. I also use an app called Scribed, so it's scribed.com. We'll put a link in the show notes, scribd.com. That's a monthly subscription, about $8 a month. And that has a lot of books, again, Audible, a lot of PDFs, a lot of stuff that maybe is not as much as maybe Amazon or etc., those types of firms. But that's good. I use Kindle Unlimited as well, so I can borrow some books for free. So that's quite useful. So Audible, Scribes. And then the other app I use is something called Readwise, which I can put in highlights of books, and then it delivers those highlights back to me on an email.
Oh gosh, okay.
So that I can highlight elements of the book, and then it'll send me an email of what those highlights are.
Right, okay.
And that's pretty useful. So it kind of because we forget stuff, don't we? I mean, you read stuff. I mean, gosh, if I remembered everything that I read, I'd be really clever. And obviously I'm not. So I don't know what the retention rate actually is, but it's not great. So that Readwise app's pretty useful. Okay. So there's some good tips there.
We'll put those on the show notes then.
Yeah.
Good stuff. So, but you've out of all of the books you've read recently, you've picked just a few to share with us today, and explain why you think listeners will benefit from reading those books.
Yeah, some ones I've really enjoyed. And it's hard to choose. 46 books on Audible, and God knows how many from physical books, etc. What have I enjoyed? Well, one of them that I really enjoyed is by Rory Sutherland, who you've just read as well, haven't you?
I have. I've just listened to that one.
You've just listened to it. Alchemy.
Painting a bedroom. Yes.
Now, Rory Sutherland is best known as the vice chairman of award-winning advertising agency Ogilvy, where he's worked since 1988. So he's a really influential advertising professional in today's world. He published a book called The Wiki Man in 2011. He's got a number of TED Talks. You can find him on TED Talks, really worthwhile listening, and he writes for The Spectator, Market Leader, Impact. So his book, Alchemy, makes a case for irrational thinking in a world enraptured by logic. And drawing on his first-hand knowledge of the advertising industry and insights from behavioural psychology, Rory Sutherland argues that the world is far too complex to be viewed through a single lens. So to solve everyday problems, we must move past superficial analysis and open ourselves up to even the most seemingly nonsensical ideas. So, really interesting book. In fact, we were chatting to one of our clients, weren't we, on New Year's Day? We met for lunch. Mark Burks, shout out to Mark Burks, who's just got back from sailing a yacht from the UK to South America and then across to Australia. So that's quite an exciting story in itself. But we were talking about it, weren't we? And he'd obviously read it himself. And we were talking about the trains, weren't we?
Yes.
And High Speed 2, we're obviously spending a lot of money as a country on that. And Rory Sutherland's perspective, well, will you tell me what his perspective was? Do you remember?
I remember some of it. So in essence, he makes the case for looking at problems in a completely different way. So instead of looking at the rational, logical data approach, he twists the problem around and asks different questions. So he says if the high-speed rail project is about saving time on people travelling from Manchester to London, then there are other ways that people could save time. So, for example, people get quite anxious about arriving at train stations in time enough to catch the train. So they often arrive a kind of 40 minutes early, or 45 minutes early apparently is quite average to arrive to catch your train. But when you've bought a particular ticket for a particular train, you're often not allowed to catch a different train. So his view was, well, why don't you spin it around and allow people to get onto earlier trains so that they are then, if there is a train arriving that can depart, within that 45 minutes they've arrived early for their scheduled train, that in essence they've already gained that 40 minutes. So there's different ways of looking at things.
And we don't probably need to get there quicker to London, do we? I mean, Mark's comment was that we're often, if I get on a train and if he gets on a train, we're reading journals, we're doing some work, we've got our laptops out. It's not actually about getting to London or wherever we're trying to get quicker. Doesn't actually actually make us much more productive, because we're pretty productive anyway on the train or doing something else, or I would say that productivity, even when I'm having a snooze, that that's quite productive. But anyway, but Rory's coming on the podcast, isn't he?
He is. We're going to be interviewing. Well, you'll be interviewing Rory sometime later in January.
Yeah. So look out for that one. That'll be really interesting, because he's a energetic, insightful guy, and
very funny.
Very funny, very funny. So look forward to that. So if you can get hold of Alchemy, please do. You can, again, there's some TED Talks that you can listen to with Rory, which are great. Or listen out for the podcast. It's a really, really good book. A very different book, which I haven't got in front of me, by a chap called Ryan Holiday. So Ryan Holiday is another media strategist, best-selling author. And an adherent or a real passionate about Stoic philosophy. So he runs a marketing agency, Brass Check, and his clients include Google, and he has a blog called the Daily Stoic Blog, which offers readers modern-day wisdom drawn from Stoic philosophy. So he's got other books that I've read, Obstacle is the Way and Ego is the Enemy, which has been read by over 2 million people. Stillness is the Key, which was last year, it came out, 2019, shows us the importance of stillness, the ability to think clearly, avoid distraction, conquer impulses and find happiness. And so drawing on wisdom from history's greatest philosophers and the habits of some of the world's greatest athletes, leaders and artists, he goes on to show how achieving stillness is a powerful way to find contentedness and success in life. And I think, we are busy. We're busy people. And there's that saying about if you want something done, you find a busy person, because they'll do it for you and it'll get it achieved. But it's more and more difficult to have opportunity to be still. Social media, news channels, you go into people's homes and the TV's never off. There's always noise. I just think that the whole philosophy of actually finding time to be still and to be quiet it's significantly important. Reduces stress, anxiety, and provides clarity of thought. So meditation is becoming much more of a common thing to do. People are getting really into mindfulness, meditation, whatever you want to call it. But just be still. Mm-hmm. Have an opportunity to do that.
And how do you go about doing that? How do people go about doing that?
I don't know. How do you do it?
Well, I think it's setting a commitment to putting aside some time in your life, and it doesn't need to be more than 5 minutes. I mean, I've not read this particular book, so I'm not quite sure what the approach is that's recommended. But in essence, you can start with just 5 minutes a day, just sitting quietly and still and letting all the distractions go and all the thoughts go.
Yeah. So anyone who's kind of feels that life's sometimes getting away from them, just taking 5 minutes out, it might sound a bit mad. How's taking 5 minutes out going to help me be more productive or efficient or get all my jobs done? But I think it does help.
And there's another saying, isn't there? I don't know the exact phrase of the saying, but in essence, the meaning is that the busier your day is ahead, the longer you should meditate for. So by meditating or having some quiet time, the longer that is, the more beneficial it'll be, and the more productive you'll be throughout the day.
So try it. Anyway, it's a great book. Really enjoyed it. I think in today's world, it's got a great message. Or if you haven't got time to read the book, maybe just have a look at Ryan's blog, The Daily Stoic, which is great. And I've been an avid fan of that for a number of years and get his regular email.
So what's next?
What's next? The Secret Barrister. The Secret Barrister I came across on Twitter. And he's written a book called The Secret Barrister, Stories of the Law and How It's Broken. He takes a behind-the-scenes look at the often chaotic and frighteningly disorganised world of England and Wales's criminal justice system. As revealed by an experienced criminal barrister, the current system is woefully underfunded and suffering from a lack of resources. It is also under threat from proposed reforms that would propose further cuts And there are, he thinks, some reasonable ways for the system to improve. So Siegfried Barrister is an anonymous pen name of someone with around about 10 years experience working in the criminal justice system, who hopes to make the system more understandable to the average citizen. His writing, or their writing, I don't know whether it could be a lady, it could be a guy. Their writing has appeared in such publications as The Guardian, The Times, and Esquire. And The Secret Barrister became a Sunday Times bestseller and was shortlisted for multiple awards. I found it really interesting. I didn't know half the stuff about the legal system and how well, from the perspective of someone who knows a little bit about the law but just didn't know anything about it, to the level of that he writes in, and it's in a humorous way, it's interesting, but it's just darn frustrating. I worry that if in the unlikely event that I was caught up in something that I needed justice done in the small claims court or the magistrates court or what have you, or I don't know, you worry, especially for people who may not have the money to fund good legal advice, that whether the system is really working. Cuts and cuts and cuts have been made, and of course it's one of those things, and until the point of needing the service, you don't realise what state it's in. So yeah, really good book. Follow him on Twitter. We'll put a link to his Twitter handle, or her Twitter handle. Siegfried Barrister. Really enjoyed it because it gave me a real insight into something that I didn't understand. And quickly, last two books. Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind.
That's quite a book, isn't it?
It is quite a book.
It's quite a heavy going book.
You'll see that actually only some of the pages are opened on this one because it was an Audible. And I don't know how long it was, but it was long.
Yes.
It was really long. So this is by Yuval, I can hopefully get the pronunciation right, Yuval Noah Harari, who is a professor at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and specialises in world and military history. Sapiens is an international bestseller. It traces the evolution of our species and from the rise of the most ancient ancestors to our current place in the modern technological age. How have we, a species of hairless, tailless apes, managed to completely dominate the entire planet? So it's really quite amazing. If you're curious about our evolution and how we've kind of ended up in this position, and also the responsibility we have to this planet, brilliant, really brilliant. But it's a big old book.
Yes, it's an in-depth book, isn't it? Yeah. It's one that can take some time to work through, but fascinating.
Absolutely fascinating. So I can suggest that. And the last one that I want to briefly mention, which is something called Ultra Learning. So for those of you watching on the YouTube channel, there's the book, and there's by the way, there's the Sapiens, how big that is. So this is by Scott Young, Accelerate Your Career, Master Hard Skills and Outsmart the Competition. So Ultra Learning's Scott Young has just hacked the system basically about how to learn stuff. And a lot of us like to learn new skills and often enough put off by how long it's going to take. Maybe the school system when you were at school or you last did study didn't particularly work for you. I would say that I'm probably one of those people. And therefore, deep learning was difficult, and actually there are a lot of hacks to it. There are a lot of strategies to it that probably aren't taught at school. So if you fancy, we talked about last year maybe New Year's resolutions, or if you've got plans or thoughts that you might like to learn something new.
You're going to learn French, aren't you?
Well, I did French as an example. I would like to learn French, but whether it's got to come on where it comes on the priority list of all the other things I've got to learn. But this really, really is a great book. Again, follow him. He's got an online course. It's really worthwhile. Or if you've got children who are trying to learn stuff and get a lot of information, in a different way maybe than the school's doing. It's a really great resource to basically to show people how that maybe the learning in a classroom environment is not actually the only way that you can take on new subjects, new topics, and learn quickly. Yeah. And therefore, if you learn quickly, you may feel chuffed quicker. So highly recommended. So that's it, really. I mean, I know that's only a few books out of 46 books and gosh knows how many others, but I know we're keeping Amazon going, I suppose. But that's hopefully some useful stuff. If you've got some books that you think that I should read or Kathy should look at or read, that'd be great. Let us know what you think, or whether you've read these books yourselves and you've got some comments you'd like to talk about. So please let us know, as always. To find out more about the Timeline app, who are now our sponsors of our podcast, and for a list of all the books discussed today, check out the show notes on our website, theretirementcafe.co.uk, where you'll find all those useful links. Once again, thanks for Kathy joining me at this week's podcast episode. And as always, if you've enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review on iTunes to help more people like you to find us. Until next time, this is Justin King, helping you feel more informed in your retirement.
Thank you for listening to the Retirement Cafe podcast with Justin King. To find out more, you can find us online at theretirementcafe.co.uk.